All right, we're gonna do a study of Judges 6, which has to do with Gideon. This is my wife Veronica.
Hi.
I'm Nolan, and we're gonna go over this and just kind of go over our thoughts. I do have this book. I actually got it from the old Goodwill store, and it's Everyone in the Bible by Barker. I don't know what his first name is, but it explains Gideon in a certain way, and I want to kind of see how this holds up at the end of the study. It says the plucky deliverer of Israel from the marauding Midianites. Gideon and his hand-picked crew of 300 commandos threw the Midianites into a panic by a sudden night attack. The Ephraimites belatedly joined Gideon in mopping up the Midianite remnants the next day, but peevishly complained they should have been allowed a more prominent part in the operation. Gideon proved his diplomatic skills by soothing the Ephraimites with a flattering speech. He also punished the villagers of Peniel and Succoth, who had sneered and refused food to Gideon's men. Established as the strong men of the region, Gideon ruled as judge over the tribes of their clans for 40 years. Until his death, he is also known by the names of Jerubbabel and Jerubseth. And that's Judges 6 to 8. So I'm going to start off with reading this, which is Judges 6. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites. Because the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and the eastern peoples invaded the country. They camped on the land and ruined the crops all the way to Gaza and did not spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep nor cattle nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count them or their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. Midian so impoverished Israel that they cried out to the Lord for help. When the Israelites cried out to the Lord because of Midian, he sent them a prophet who said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I rescued you from the hand of Egyptians and delivered you from the hand of all your oppressors. I drove them out before you and gave you their land. I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you live, because you have not listened to me. But you have not listened to me." So basically, it's setting a scene of Israel is, they're being attacked by these invaders and they're hiding because they're scared because every time these guys come up against them, they get taken over. So, a lot of people have issues when they hear that. You look at the beginning of it, the Lord gave them into the hands of Midian. And a lot of people are like, wow, that's cruel of God. But I kind of see the way I look at it is God is outside of time. He sees the repercussions of all our actions. So when he warned Israel to obey him, those that came with the stipulation of if you obey me, you're going to prosper. If you try to do it your way, I can tell you right now, it's not going to work. And I kind of relate that to like with kids. You can tell them something's hot, don't touch it. But sometimes they're going to go touch it anyway. And I think that sometimes that one kid, not all kids, but some kids need that experience. Like, oh, that was hot. Dad was right. It's like, yeah, it is what it is. You had to figure it out. Or they could be building something, and you're like, hey, man, I get you're building this little tower out of books, but your base is horrible, son. If you don't fix that all those books are going to cave down, and it's going to hurt. It's going to suck. Nope, Dad, I'm going to build it my way. And you're like, okay, fine. I tried. I told you again, and you're not listening, so I'm going to let you do it. And he does it. It falls over. Then he's like, okay, Dad was right, and that lesson was something he needed to learn. Obviously, this is on a bigger scale. I mean, people were dying. And when it comes to God, he's the creator of life. And it's a bigger scale. So, yeah, they were dying and being invaded and starving at some points. But this is our souls here. This is our internal battle. It's the bigger picture. We see things on a smaller scale. That's why I can compare it to my kids. But when it comes to God, things are typically on a bigger scale. So, I mean, with you and the experience with the kids, do you have anything you'd like to add? Because, I mean, you're with them more than I am.
No, I think it's pretty much that sometimes they don't want to listen and they want to do it their way, like you said, and then things end up not good. They learn.
Yeah, they learn sometimes the hard way. I was a kid that had to learn the hard way. I'll be honest. I had to make a lot of mistakes where I actually started listening to what my grandparents told me. some people that is what it is. And God basically came and told them, hey, this is because you're not listening. It's because you're taking things into your own hands, and this is what came upon you. And so he basically sent this prophet, and the prophet went down and spoke to him. So all of Israel now knows there's a buzzing like, hey, we were told this is because we haven't listened to God. Now, some people probably believe that. Some people are like, yeah, that's a bunch of phooey from our great-grandparents or our grandparents. Yeah, they got rescued miraculously. But so there's like an attitude going around where people are probably realizing, some people are probably denying. Who knows exactly what it was, but the next verse says, the angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abzerite. I think I said that right. When his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. So Gideon's down in this winepress, and he's threshing wheat, which is separating the chaff from the wheat. Usually they would toss it in the air, and because one side's heavier than the other, the wind would separate it, and the good stuff would drop to the ground, and the bad stuff would blow away. And you can't really get that done in a wine press. It's got to be very difficult. You're probably not throwing it up in the air. You're probably having to pick through it by hand, which makes it more difficult. And he's doing that because he's scared, because it just set the scene that the Midianites are coming in and attacking and destroying everything they had. So after that it says, when the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. And I would say Gideon probably didn't feel like a mighty warrior. He probably looked behind him real quick to see who the angel of the Lord was really talking to, because, he wasn't doing anything brave, and he definitely didn't feel like a mighty warrior. He was being a coward, more or less. And rightfully so. I mean, that's a scary thing to deal with. I think anyone would, but it just goes to show that God sees you differently than what you see yourself as. You can consider yourself a loser, you consider yourself a gossiper, whatever title you can put in front of yourself because of your actions. God doesn't see you like that. When God redeems you or when he calls you out, it's by who he sees you as. It's not by who you think you are. Do you have anything to add to that? Is that point?
I guess just like the whole like the dirty rag. It's like we might feel like dirty rags, but like in front of once we get to Jesus, like our rags are clean, as white as snow. And our past sometimes can feel like it's still on like a label on us, but it's not no more with Jesus.
Yeah, very true. That's a good way to allude to Jesus in this. When you're reading the Old Testament, a lot of people think it's separate from the New Testament. And I've actually heard people say, yeah, I don't read the Old Testament, but I think the Old Testament gives us a lot of wisdom and a lot of really good examples on how we should conduct ourselves and also how God sees us. And I think it matches up really well when Jesus comes in time. So here's what Gideon replies to him. Pardon me, my lord, Gideon replied, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all the wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us in the hand of Midian. So Gideon acknowledges, there's this buzzing going around, and even him, that's his doubt, okay, you say this is the Lord doing this, but where has been the Lord? Where's the Lord of my grandparents? Where my parents? I mean, where is he? And he's given us in the hands of Midian, but I mean, where has he been this whole time? So Gideon is not only doubtful, he's being a coward, but he's being very doubtful in God. And I think that happens in our lives too. A lot of the time, we look at things and we can be like, okay, God, is this really what you want from me? Is this what you've destined for me? And, we get kind of doubtful, especially when you're not a believer. And when you're not a believer, it's really easy to point to, okay, it's God doing that. But as a believer, we can even take on the same attitude sometimes. And sometimes when we get rebuked or we get, a lesson taught to us, we're like, nah, that's not God. God's not mad at me for doing this. This is in my imagination. Even sometimes when we have very clear-cut signs that it needs to stop, we like to hold on to our sin, our bad habits, the things that we do. Being a gossip can make you feel good because you're talking so bad about other people. It takes the attention off how bad you're being. And it gives people attention to you in a way that you're like, hey, I can kind of lead this and be at the top of this. When honestly, gossip just hurts people, including yourself, and it makes people not trust you, and it betrays friends and stuff like that. So this attitude here is an attitude I think we have even nowadays. Even as believers, we have that attitude. So anything about that? It sums it up. All right. The Lord turned on to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? So God replies, hey, dude, I'm telling you to go do it. Just go do it. It's no big deal. You're asking where God is? I'm telling you, I'm right here. I'm trying to help you. But, pardon me, my Lord, Gideon replied, but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. And that's the thing is like, he was of the weakest clan. He was probably a small dude. He was scared. He probably couldn't imagine how someone like him could accomplish something so big. But the problem is, and the answer to that is he can't accomplish something that big. It can't happen without God. It's impossible. Someone like him would not be able to accomplish that without having God. So the Lord answered, I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive. Gideon replied, if now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you. So now, again, he's doubting, like, okay, well, if you are God, here's what I'll do. I'll go prepare a sacrifice like my parents told me how to. You stay here till I'm done, and we'll see how this goes. And you would think, okay, so now he's doubted God, he's questioned God, he's denied that he's even capable of doing what God's asking him to go do. And now he's like, well, if this is you, let me go prepare a sacrifice. So it's more doubt. And this is something that's interesting. And the Lord said, I will wait until you return. So a lot of times we feel guilty when we doubt God or we doubt certain things and we think God's mad at us because we have doubted. But in all honesty, it's like, I will wait for you until you return. God is patient with us consistently. A lot of times people only see wrath in the Old Testament, they only see anger. But there's a lot of mercy and forgiveness and an attitude God's trying to teach his people to have. God's not mad at you when you question. Job questioned, Moses whined and complained, like, hey, dude, I don't speak that good. And God's like, well, I gave you your mouth, so this. But even so, God sent Aaron. So God's very patient with us. And it's just interesting that he just went through like this whole line of like, I doubt you. Is this really true? I can't do this. Well, if it's really you, you have those kind of attitudes. And God's still very patient. I will wait for you. I will wait until you return. Think to that?
I guess the thing I was thinking about was, I grew up in church, and and there was a lot of when I turned away from God, and I was a teenager, and I started living a very wicked, sinful life, and it wasn't until I started praying and turning my heart back towards God that I started to feel His presence, and like He came and restored me and changed my life completely.
With that, you found out, I guess, that God was waiting for you to return, and that there was no point where he just gave up on you and like he got frustrated, like you were too far gone, like God didn't know you were going to do that stuff. I mean, God sees outside of time.
Yeah.
So that's a very good point. So Gideon went inside, prepared a young goat, and from an ephah of flour he made bread without yeast, putting the meat in the basket and the broth in its pot. He brought them out and offered them to him under the oak. This is cool too. The angel of God said to him, take the meat and the unleavened bread, place them on the rock, and pour out the broth. And Gideon did so. Then the angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread with the tip of his staff, and was in his hand. Fire flared up from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread, and the angel of the Lord disappeared. So here's the thing: is not only did God wait for him, and in the midst of all that doubt and complaining, but then God showed up and proved himself in a very spectacular way. And like, it's going to be kind of hard to doubt if someone touches their staff to something and then disappears in the flame. You're kind of like, oh, that was real. And I think it was convincing at the time just by Gideon's response. When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. So he thinks he's going to die. He's like, oh no, what have I done? The typical response when someone sees the angel of the Lord, because I think they view God in that wrathful way. And like, I think at that moment he's like, wow, I just questioned the real God. I just was snarky to the real God, and I just doubted the real God. And I put him up to this little test, and he showed up. And that was God. And he was like, whoa, buddy, face to the ground, bowing, I'm going to die. Really scared. But let's be honest, God wouldn't have sent him out to be a mighty warrior if he was just going to kill him, So, but the Lord said to him, peace, do not be afraid, you are not going to die. So Gideon built an altar to the Lord, and and called it, the Lord is peace. To this day it stands in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. So, at this moment in Gideon's walk, and we can compare it to our walk, is we have these moments of like, are we good enough? Are we doubting? And then God shows up, and there's like this millstone in our life, and I can relate that to building an altar. There's like a millstone in our life where like, okay, we're going to start walking right. and we're going to do well, and we're going to do really good. And a lot of times we walk away from that, or we let our sin lead us away from that altar. Anything to add to that?
No, I think that's true.
Okay. Um, so with that, the same night the Lord said to him, "Take the second bull from your father's herd, the one 7 years old, tear down your father's altar to Baal, and cut down the Asherah pole besides it. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on the top of this height. Using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down, offer the second bull as a burnt offering." So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord told him. But because he was afraid of his family and the townspeople, he did it at night rather than the daytime. So with that too is like, now you have this altar in your life, and you build this altar, and like God showed up. You're like, I'm gonna start walking right, and then God says, okay, very nice. I've proved myself to you. I've shown you I'm here. Here's what I have for you to do. And then He gives it to you. And you're like, I'm kind of scared of the people. I'll do it, but I got to do it kind of my own way. You let your old self creep in. Although you're this new person, you kind of let this old person creep back in and take control of you in that way. And that can go for any time we do something. We can start to let our old selves sink in, our insecurities. Like say you started giving some of your finances to the church, and you beforehand you were very financially unstable, and you start giving and it feels good, and honestly some money starts coming back. Like, wow, that's crazy that I even have this money to spare, and I was barely making ends meet, and now I have a little extra put away. Then you give again and you give again. Well, maybe some doesn't come back next time, and now it's like, well, this is all I have in my account. And that old person where you're like, I was bad with my finances, I have fear, I need to hold on to this money now, comes and gets you. And I'm using that example because that's how it was in my life for a lot of the time. I was so afraid to give money because like, well, I'm not going to have anything. All these things I'm praying for, I can get with this money. But I feel that every time I do give money, and it's not that I'm expecting anything in return, but I end up getting this peace. It doesn't matter if I have the money or not. Everything ends up working out. I mean, weird story just recently. We were giving our money, we didn't have much, and I needed boxer briefs. My wife's out on a walk with the kids, and somebody was setting things out front of their house to give away, and there was 2 unopened packages of boxers. And now I have boxers. Weird story, but God gave me some underwear. So anyway, I'll get out of here. So in the morning, when the people of the town got up, there was Baal's altar demolished, with the Asherah pole beside it cut down, and the second bull sacrificed on the newly built altar. They asked each other, who did this? When they had carefully investigated, they were told Gideon, son of Joash, did it. The people of the town demanded of Joash, bring your son. He must die, because he has broken down the Baal altar and cut the Asherah pole beside it. But Joash replied to the hostile crowd around him, are you going to plead Baal's cause? Are you trying to save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar. So because Gideon broke down Baal's altar, they gave him the name Jerubbaal that day, saying, let Baal contend with him. Now all the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern people joined forces and crossed over the Jordan and camped in the valley of Jezreel. So he did have reason to be scared, because these people did want to kill him for breaking down these altars. And Baal was a god that people sacrificed their own newborn babies to. He's basically Satan. So let's just be honest. Israel was worshiping Satan at this time. That's how far they'd fallen. When it's talking about Israel did evil on the side of the Lord, they completely turned away from God and gone to worshiping Satan. Go back to the garden when Adam and Eve ate the apple and they turned towards Satan, and God immediately, they got cast out of the garden, but God was still in their life. When they went out, God was still with them and helped guide them, and He built animal skins for them, and they kind of rebuilt their connection with God. These people have straight turned to Satan. Satan said, hey, doesn't the apple look good? And these people not only ate it, kept eating it, and kept growing those apples, because they wanted those apples. And that's the fruit they were bearing. So, when it says Israel was being evil, they were being evil. Another thing that's interesting is these pagans gave Gideon this pagan name, Jerubbaal. Let Baal contend. So that's not his name. Gideon is his name. Jerubbaal is what the pagans called him. And it's like a pagan, alter ego, I guess. It's not his, but it was cast on him. So I'll explain more about that later, because I find that part interesting. But I'm going to read the rest of this chapter just to kind of finish it up and give our thoughts on it. So then the Spirit of the Lord came on Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, summoning the Azarites to follow him. He sent messengers throughout Manasseh, calling them to arms, and also into Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali. So they too went up to meet him. Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and on the dry ground, or the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you said." And this is what happened. Gideon rose early the next day. He squeezed the fleece and wrung out the dew, a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, "Do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece, but this time make the fleece dry and let the ground be observed with dew." That night God did so. Only the fleece was dry and all the ground was covered with dew. So we're going to stop there. That's just the first chapter. And what I want to say about that is, like, not only did God show up and put up with his complaining and his whining, but he showed himself by zipping up into that fire, asked him to do a request. Gideon was like, "Yeah, I'll kind of do it. I'll do it," but he let his sin kind of creep back into his life and affect the way he did it. But God still wasn't mad at him. God didn't like say, "Because you didn't do it this way," kind of thing. He was very gentle with him. And then the spirit of the Lord comes over Gideon, and he's ready to fight these people coming up. And then he has a spirit, and then he starts to doubt. And he's like, "Well, wait a minute, God. If this really is what you're telling me to do, can you just do this test for me?" And God didn't say, "Because you've questioned me and haven't believed me, I'm going to do this, that, and the next thing." No, God showed him and did exactly what he asked. And again, here's a little bit of doubt. He's like, "Well, can you do it this way now?" And instead of God being angry, like, "Hey, I told you to do this, you're not doing it, here's punishment," God showed him another time. So there's 3 miracles that he witnesses in this, in a way. And he still has doubt. I mean, you're going to find out in the next chapter, he still doubts, but we'll get to the next chapter at another time. The crazy thing about this is, like, I think that's me as a Christian a lot of the time. There's a lot of times where I feel a strong calling on my life. I'm like, wow, this is what I'm meant to do. And then doubt creeps in. And I'm like, oh, no, like, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to do, God. Golly gee whiz, And then I get, like, a sign. And what I'll say to that is, like, I took a second job at a Christian drug and alcohol rehab facility. And there's a lot of times where I'm doing that. I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this. Like, I make enough money at my normal job. Why am I even doing this? And, like, a lot of the times I'll go through a whole shift and, like, I'm not feeling God at all. I'm just like, in my mind, I'm like, well, maybe I'm not called to be here. Maybe I just shouldn't be here. But when I originally took that job, there was something telling me to go work there, or something that I needed to. And then at the last few minutes of shift, I'm talking. It could be with a client. It could be with a fellow staff member. And all of a sudden, there's this outpouring, like, where this thing comes up. And I kind of feel almost like the Holy Spirit hits me. And I start talking about Bible verses. I start talking about things I've learned when I'm reading, and it starts relating, and we start opening up, and we start talking to each other. And it could be a staff member, it could be a client. It doesn't matter. It's like it's in the most random of a way. And then it's all that doubt. It's like, man, I'm so sorry, Lord. I should never have doubted you like that. And it strengthens me for the next time that I go back and, like, even if I don't feel something today, if I don't see something today, I remember that calling. I remember that strong pull to do this. And until it's time for me to leave, that's what I'm going to stick to doing. So I feel like what Gideon's doing, it's dumb, but it's something I do constantly, and I know I do it constantly. As I walk with God every day, and every day I have some kind of doubt or I have some kind of silly thing to get over that's all me, and it's my sin, it's my doubt, it's my unfaithfulness. But what I'm really thankful for, and what shows in here, is God expects that. He knows that. He knows I'm going to be like that. He knows no doubt, and He prepares things for me in a different way, and He's gentle with me. He's not yelling at me, "Nolan, you've done too much. It's too far gone. You're done." So in this aspect, I'm very grateful for the way God's with Gideon, because I know He's that way with me as well. Anything you'd like to add to that, my love?
I guess the only thing would be, like, I guess I feel that way as well when it comes to the children, and even when it came to, like, homeschooling them, just felt like I wasn't really doing too much, that there really wasn't no purpose, and what was my purpose here, and teaching them. I think when I start to see that they're doing so good, and seeing them all at the table, and being able to go outside, and hearing them talk about their Bible verses and singing all the worship songs, it all feels very worth it, and like I'm actually doing something and for God.
Yeah, it's like you can pray for that help, and there's a lot of times where you feel like it's not happening. You're like, there's nothing happening, but God shows up all the time, just like He showed up for Gideon. And it might not be, you might not be able to, like, get a fleece and wring out the dew. Maybe that's not the way God's going to show you, but if you continue to have faith in the Lord and pursue Him and follow what He's telling you to do, and follow what your heart's guiding you to do, when it comes to the Lord, then God's going to show up and reveal things to you and make sure you're going the right way, and show you how to be. He's a good father, and just like we give good things to our kids, God gives endlessly more to us, and it's on a bigger scale. It's on a bigger battlefield. This is for your souls. This is internal. This is the bigger picture. It's not just in my house with my kids in a small setting. This is in the bigger picture. It's in the setting of the world. We're all His children, and we're all interacting with one another. And sometimes my kids need to interact with each other. They need to figure out things themselves. Sometimes I step back as a parent and let them kind of figure it out, and I see if they can apply the lessons I've been teaching them to their relationship with one another. And I think that is the way that God does it with us. There's a lot of things we learn from reading our Bible, from praying, from connecting with God, and then we go out in the real world and we're interacting with our brothers and sisters in Christ, or just our brothers and sisters on this earth. And we're supposed to use these lessons how to be better siblings to them all, to be better people to them all. And that's all I really got for today. I just wanted to kind of go over that real quick while it was fresh in my mind. I want to thank my wife, Veronica, for coming here and help me out. Just her presence being here is wonderful, and I love that. So thank you guys. I hope everyone's having a blessed day. Toodaloo.